Chapter 4 Existential Dynamics of Theorizing Black Invisibility. Points of Interest. Point 1. White Purity versus Black Darkness. This chapter states that we live in an anti-black world, and therefore there exists anti-black racism, which is basically designed to rid the world of the pollution of blackness to preserve the purity of whiteness. The chapter goes on to list how a white man even having a drop of blackness is seen as a bad thing. This chapter also starts by explaining how people often see blackness before nationality. So they'll see skin color before even asking or wondering if they're African American, Afro-Caribbean, or whatever their ethnicity or nationality could even be. Point 2. Perspective in the world. Our body is our perspective in the world. Basically, this chapter explains how our perspective is based on three different sides. Our perspective of seeing, our perspective of being seen, and our consciousness of being seen. This leads into the next point, point 3, sadism versus masochism, in context of the chapter. Our sadist perspective is consciousness of the flesh. It seeks to evade its own perspectivity, basically meaning that it's only concerned with flesh and fleshiness aspects of human existence, skin color, certain facial features, things such as that. It also compares masochism, which is the denial of themselves being seen, the denial of their responsibility for their own existence or their own actions. They constitute themselves as being helpless and controlled. This is basically the side of people that doesn't want to be seen. They just want to mesh or join in with the rest of the world. They don't see themselves as different, or they don't see themselves as having their own personalities or their own uniqueness. They just want to move in with the rest of the world. Point 4. The anti-black world. As stated earlier, we live in an anti-black world, and therefore we have to deal with certain aspects of this. Point being a little black is often seen as being too black, and blackness represents crime and wrongdoing, which in reality it doesn't, but often human perspective and white perspective sees black as wrong, as constantly just doing something wrong or incorrect in terms of societal values. I found it interesting how this chapter also mentioned the fact that Egypt and other civilized regions were severed from their African links because Africa and Africans were seen as negative aspects or negative individuals in terms of society. Point 5 and the final point, blackness. The chapter created a scenario where an African American was at a cocktail party. They were surrounded by a large number of whites, and they found themselves trying to relate to them and trying to join in with them. They were trying to fit in. Once they realized that they weren't being judged based on their skin color or being noticed per se for their skin color, they found themselves more comfortable because they were able to relate with whites. They were able to fit in with whites. They felt as though they were one of them. However, when another African American entered the room, there was a sense of more natural relation. They were the same. There was no presence of silent white arrogance that was suggesting that the African American who was originally in the room should be like them. Since they were both African Americans, there was no presence of this feeling. They felt like they were one and the same. So, someone who's reading this chapter for the first time should gather that African Americans are human beings and they deserve to be treated as such. We need to get rid of white arrogance and white ignorance, and slowly but surely, we need to ultimately get rid of this anti-black society that exists in America and in other parts of the world as well. We need to see each other as the same. Not one should be like the other, but we should all just consider ourselves human beings.